Out of this crisis that we're in, so many words and phrases are bubbling to the surface that will in time define what this time was all about. Flattening the curve, essential services, quarantine. And a month ago, how many of us would have ever used the words social and distancing in the same sentence? Some of the words and phrases we have become used to are harsh and they're difficult to hear. I'd be happy if I never heard the word ventilator again. But there are some that we hear that give us reason to lift our heads and to feel encouraged. And one of those words is hero. Every crisis has its heroes, and this one is no different. There are no shortage of heroes in this unique war that we are waging. And when I say they make us lift our heads, that's exactly what they do. Our heroes reorient us away from the negative to the positive. They inoculate us from despair. In their acts of selflessness and courage, they give us confidence, and they give us strength, and they give us hope. Mr. Rogers famously said that in any crisis we must look for the helpers, and there are no shortage of helpers to look to. I'm going to come back to some examples, but first let me ask you, what does that word hero mean to you? What other words or pictures come to mind? And has that definition of that word changed with you over time? When I was a kid, I think I was a pretty typical Canadian kid. A hero was a designation that I would give to someone who wasn't a regular person doing regular stuff, but someone who had special powers or even superpowers. I grew up in the 70s, and one of my favorite shows was The Super Friends. Do you remember that show? It was all the great superheroes gathered together in the halls of justice to preside over the world's ills and defeat the world's bad guys, known as the Legion of Doom. And they were all there. Superman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, the Wonder Twins, Batman and Robin, Supergirl, and remember Superdog? I always wonder what happened to Superdog. It was a Saturday morning staple in our house. Watched usually in PJs, balancing a bowl of corn pops on our knee, because that was the only day that we were allowed to have sugary cereal was on Saturday morning. And after it was done, my brother, my sister, and I would play Super Friends all morning. Now, my sister always did so under the proviso that we play Barbie Star Camper later in the day. Sometimes we did, and sometimes we didn't. But I was always Superman, my brother was always Batman, and my sister was Wonder Woman. And we would pretend that we were hot on the heels of some bad guy making the world safe for the good guys. In a child's world of magic and make-believe, a hero is someone often outside the realm of reality. They wear a cape, they have an S on their shirt, or they fly an invisible jet. But as the magical world of childhood starts to melt away, and the challenges of real life take their place, that definition of hero begins to shift with it. I think it's a gradual shift. We move from heroes as superheroes protecting the universe to people who protect us in real life. Police officers, paramedics, firefighters, soldiers. But then we expand that definition a little more, don't we? And suddenly a hero doesn't have to wear a uniform or carry a gun. They are the person who fixes our teeth when they're hurting, or coaches our soccer team, or teaches us to dance, or stands in front of our classroom and reveals to us a world of knowledge. We suddenly realize that superheroes don't exist, but super people do, and our definition changes. It's a great story in which a grown man reflects on his childhood at a moment when all of that shifted for him. He was a baseball fan, and he found out his favorite baseball player was coming to play in the city where he lived. He asked his mom, who was a single mom, if they could go. And even though she couldn't afford it, she purchased 2 tickets for them to go. She also bought him a t-shirt, popcorn, and after the game was finished, you could line up and you could have your autograph with the players. And this little guy asked his mom if he could line up, and she said yes, knowing full well it probably meant that they would miss their bus on the way home. But this was important. And so he lined up for over an hour, and finally he got to the front of the line. And there he was, standing in front of his hero, this great baseball player he'd always admired. And then he wrote that he looked behind him and he saw his mom standing there smiling. And he said in that moment he realized who the real hero in his life was. Do you know where the word hero actually comes from? It comes from Greek mythology. Hero was a priestess of Aphrodite, who was the goddess of love. And there's a great story about Hero. She lived in a tower in a place called Cetos, at the edge of a body of water that today is called the Dardanelles. As the story goes, Hero fell in love with a man named Leander, who lived on the other side of the strait. The two were divided by water, but they longed to be together. So every night Hero would light a candle in her tower, and Leander would swim across the strait guided by the light, so he could be with his beloved Hero. It's a great image, and it's a great definition. What is a hero? Someone who, in the service of love, lights a candle to guide the way of another. Jesus' most famous sermon that he gave, in fact the only sermon he gave, has been called the Sermon on the Mount. It's long, and it details and addresses nearly every human condition. It sets out goals by which to live. It's basically his manifesto of faith, his statement of how life can and should be lived. But honestly, you could define it all in 2 verses that he says. Jesus said these words, and remember he was saying them to people who perhaps share some parallels with us today. They were living under occupation and threat. They were fearful and worried for their future. They were subject to forces beyond their control. And he said to them point blank, "You are the light of the world. Do not hide your light, but let it shine." This situation that we are in has for me, and I hope it has for you, defined again who or what a hero really is. It's reminded me again of what it means to let your light shine. So who are they? As someone wisely said, our heroes don't wear capes, they wear scrubs. Truly, what finer heroes than the frontline people, the doctors, nurses, respiratory therapists, healthcare workers, who every day are going into this battle, every day making sacrifices worthy of any soldier in any war. But stretch that definition a little. Some of the great unsung heroes in this crisis are cleaners, custodians, people who daily, sometimes hourly, disinfect and scrub down surfaces so we can stay healthy. Stretch it further. Truck drivers, spending long, long hours on lonely highways so that food and supplies can get where they need to go. Stretch it further. Those working in care homes, keeping our most fragile citizens safe. Police officers, border patrol officers, ensuring people can't bring the virus into this country. And there are so many more. I saw a touching cartoon, and it was all the Super Friends together, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and they were standing as a group, and they were looking down at a couple of grocery store clerks. And Wonder Woman was saying to them, "We voted, and you're in." You know, 2 weeks ago, would a Loblaws employee working at a cash register have called herself or himself a hero? Probably not. But now, we all know that that's exactly what they are. Stretch it even further. How about parents who suddenly find themselves at home with nervous, bored, and confused children, having to explain why they can't go to the park or out to McDonald's for a treat? They are projecting calm, while inside they may be just as worried as everyone else. And then there are those truly remarkable stories of heroes that leave us breathless. I'm sure you've heard of the Italian priest, Father Don Giuseppe Baratelli, who, fighting for his life, willingly gave his respirator to a younger person so that they could enjoy the long life that he felt that he had been given. This crisis has redefined the word hero. And my hope is that when all of this settles, as it will, and we gain again our perspective, as we will, and we reflect on the lessons of this time in history, I hope this new definition of hero sticks. As much as I love my professional sports, and I do, no one is worth $10 million to bounce a ball or shoot a puck. But the wealth of a society should be measured by those who serve, sacrifice, and give so much to build communities and nations and individuals based on kindness and strength and compassion. I hope our heroes in this crisis remain our heroes when the crisis passes. To kind of bring this together today, let me just share one of my favorite parables. And to all those at Northwest, you've heard this maybe a couple of times, but I think it captures what this idea is all about. As the story goes, there was a business owner who owned a string of very successful dollar stores. And he was told by his doctor after a long career that he needed to retire. This man had 3 children, and he knew they would take over the stores, the business. But he also knew only one of them could be the CEO. How could he choose? So he decided he was going to give them a contest. So he invited them all to come to the room where he was, and he gave them all $100. And he said, I want you to go out and spend only $100 and come back with something that fills this room. He said, you have 24 hours. Off they went. In 24 hours they came back, and the father asked him how they had done. Well, first his eldest son came forward and he said, well, Dad, I took the $100 and I went to a farm and I bought some hay. He said, what's this? Brings in hay bales and he opens them up and he throws the hay into the air. And for just a moment, it seems like the room is filled. But then the hay, of course, settles back down on the ground. Next, his second child, his daughter, comes forward and she said, Dad, I went to the store, I went to Walmart and I bought feather pillows. What's this? She takes out the feather pillows and she rips them open and she throws the feathers in the air, and for just a moment it appears that the room is filled. But again, they settle down on the floor. Finally, his third son comes forward and he says, Dad, first of all, I know that you are always good to other people. I took $99 of the $100 and I gave it to someone who needed it. With the other $1, I went into a dollar store, much like the one that you had started, and I purchased this. He reached into his pocket and he pulled out a candle and a book of matches. He walked over to the light, he flicked it off, plunging the room in darkness, and then he lit the candle. And suddenly the room was filled from corner to corner, from floor to ceiling, not with hay and not with feathers, but with light. Father said to the son, you've shown great insight and wisdom and grace, and you shall lead my business. What is a hero? It is one who in the service of love lights a candle to guide another. They are all around us right now. We give thanks for their light, for darkness only wins when light refuses to shine. And every little act of grace or love or sacrifice or service, whether nursing a patient back to health, walking a neighbor's dog who's in quarantine, calling or FaceTiming a friend to check on them, or simply keeping a positive and hopeful presence, refusing to be overwhelmed by it all, brings light to this dark place that we are in. It lifts our heads. It fights off despair. It reminds us that in our heroes there is hope. So we can and we will keep swimming towards the light. You are the light of the world. Do not hide your light, but let it shine. Amen.